Right now, let's switch gears, talk a little football. Joining us now, ESPN NFL insider. He is our friend, Mr. Jeremy Fowler. He's back with us now here on GCR. Jeremy, it's Glenn and Paul in Baltimore. It's great to chat with you as always. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for us this morning.
Hey guys, yeah, thanks again. How you doing?
Everything is good. So, is DK Metcalf really available or not, Jeremy? Like we heard, the way that you reported it. I know, and trust me, I'm considering the source, but like Howard Eskin said, hey, the Jets tried to give him the number 10 pick. They didn't want that. Is he really available, or is it more like, yeah, if you want to if you want to pay the Deshaun Watson price, we'll trade him to you?
So they're not shopping him, and they've given indications that he's not available. I just think that there's, you know, if a team wants to get aggressive enough, I think they can make it happen. So it's probably somewhere in the middle of what you're laying out. There's some gray area here, but I do asking people in Seattle. I do get the sense that they're in a good place with him, and but it's just it's the money's going to be huge,
Right.
and they're going to have to pay him close to $25 million a year right now. It looks like. I just don't think they're crazy about doing that right now. So. Something's going to have to give. They just have to make that hard decision. I don't think any negotiations have happened yet.
Okay.
So,
okay.
It's going to be if a team like the Jets want to give up a first or want to give up huge capital, I think it could happen. But right now, there's no movement, and Seattle is definitely comfortable holding on to him and making him a part of their future.
It feels like it's worth it to pay that type of price, and I'm not, saying the Ravens would because it's in their history they don't do that type of thing, but. Man, do you have one of these guys? It changes things. There's a reason why these guys are getting $25 million a year on the open market. They're getting paid the way quarterbacks used to get paid, right? Like, it just feels like it's worth that type of price. We hear A.J. Brown's name now being brought up by some people. I'm like, who wouldn't want to have this type? Do we see how much better these quarterbacks are? Josh Allen was a mess, and then Stephon Diggs showed up, and they're like, yeah, he's probably worth $26 million a year because we saw what happened the moment he arrived here. Jeremy, it's just shocking to me that teams are still kind of balking at the value of the wide receivers a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is because of the draft. I mean, so many good guys come to the draft. Look at the four guys that need to be paid right now. It's A.J. Brown, Terry McLaurin,
right.
DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, all picks outside of the first round, all studs who are going to get huge deals, So there's so many young guys that come in and ready to play right away, and that used to not be the case always. So I think that's part of the issue why teams don't want to pay that. In a case like Diggs, I mean, he's pretty clearly a top 5 guy. He fits what they do. He's part of their culture. He and Josh Allen are tight, instant chemistry. So they're paying for more than just a good receiver in that case.
Sure.
So I do think it's a case-by-case basis depending on where the team's at. That's why DK Metcalf is somebody that people are watching, around the league because of the situation. Russ is out. They're clearly in a bit of a transition, So
right.
Do you want to just start over and maybe use some of your draft capital to get a receiver instead?
Can you explain why Tyrann Mathieu is still available at this point? It's the thing that makes the absolute least sense to me about how free agency has gone, Jeremy.
Well, I think it's because teams feel like they've seen a little bit of decline. That's not a knock on him. It's just he's played 9 years, a lot of mileage. So, later in the year last year, it looked like he had slowed up a little bit. That's just the sense talking to other teams. Now, is he a great player? Absolutely. Can he help a team? Yes. But it's, he was probably at a price point that wasn't attractive to teams based on what they saw on the film last year.
He is.
So that's the holdup, really. So I think he's probably going to end up taking a 1-year deal with high upside. And we'll see what happens at New Orleans. He just visited them.
He is ESPN NFL insider Jeremy Fowler. He's spending a couple of minutes with us this morning here on GCR. Jeremy, bringing it back to Baltimore, the Ravens tried to land Zadarius Smith. They've just not been able to find anything as far as pass rush help is, and it might just be that now at this point it's going to come down to the draft. Is there anything that's still out there that you would say, it feels like it would be worth doing something like this for a team that clearly identified pass rush help as a need and hasn't been able to do anything about it in free agency?
Yeah, I think they'll address that in the draft, but you also have you got some options. You could bring back Justin Houston, although I know he's on the back 9, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Jadeveon Clowney, I always thought he'd be a good fit coming back with Anthony Weaver, who's kind of their assistant head coach, defensive line. He was with him in Houston together. He knows Clowney well. So, I wouldn't discount something like that. But they've looked at some other guys. I think Rasheem Green, free agent. I think they would have signed him. Apparently, something slowed up with his market because he's been close with a few different teams. So we'll see. I think they'll end up getting a mid-range guy on a one-year deal at some point of free agency. It might just be after the draft. At this point, there's really no need to panic. The guys that are available now will probably be available late April, early May, unless the team has their draft meeting and figures like, man, we don't want to have to address this certain position in the first 2 rounds, 3 rounds, so let's just get a guy now.
Yeah, I feel a little bit more comfortable that route. Jeremy, what do you make of the ongoing Lamar Jackson saga? I mean, we've kind of talked it to death over the course of the last month. It still confuses the hell out of me in part because we just don't know who to talk to, but if the truth is really that he just wants to wait a year, like that seems like it's great news for the Ravens because they get him in a lesser number this year and they still get to lock him up. But there's so much fear that the idea is he really just is hell bent on getting to free agency for whatever reason. What do you make of this?
Well, I think that's the ultimate leverage for a quarterback, but he's got to go through 3 years of that. I mean, that would be a major risk for his style of play to play 3 years on a 5th-year option, 2 franchise tags. I think if Baltimore could pull that off, they'd be in a great spot. I don't know. At some point, the player would probably hold out, and it could be this year. Like I think he just figured it doesn't hurt to wait a little bit. I'm a former MVP. Like I've got the clout in the bank. The whole system and team is built around me and my skill set. It's different than like Baker Mayfield's case where it kind of fell apart. Like, the Ravens are all in on Lamar based on the way they play, the way they've designed things, and he knows that. So there's really no need to overreact. I think that's all it is. I don't know. I'd be surprised if he's willing to play out 3 years to get to free agency. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. That would be awesome to see. I think that would be a great experiment to get a guy like that. I mean, look what happened with Dak Prescott. He hit it huge just by waiting and being patient.
And that's the interesting part to me, Jeremy, is it seems like you don't have to wait any longer for free agency in order to use that leverage, right? Like that. If we learned anything from the Deshaun Watson thing, it's that it feels like the quarterbacks always have. They could just declare themselves free agents at any point and say, I have you over a barrel. It really does feel like there's this reckoning that's occurring with the quarterback position where everybody complains about how much money they make, but we realize you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a prayer, and so they're probably really worth more like 50% of your cap because of it. And it seems like he wouldn't have to wait till free agency. If he walked in today and said, either pay me this amount now or trade me, there's probably the Panthers are probably pretty desperate. There's got to be a desperate team who'd be willing to give him that type of money. It just seems like you don't need free agency any longer in order to have that leverage as a quarterback.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of that. I think I think if you're Lamar Jackson, you're probably saying, "Hey, look, we can make this easy." I'm just imagining when they start negotiations, he can say, "We can make this easy. I won't take a penny more than Deshaun Watson, but I also won't take a penny less."
Exactly right.
And then that's the deal. That's sort of the bed that was made, and that's why you wait because the market continues to develop. So. I don't know that Baltimore would do that. I really don't think they would.
Okay.
Which is why this is a fascinating situation. Although the Baltimore's guaranteed more money in recent deals, like Mark Andrews comes to mind. I believe Marlon Humphrey's deal had a lot of guarantees. So maybe they're bending a little bit on that and they can find a sweet spot. I'd just be shocked if they say, "Hey, here's $230 million fully guaranteed." I don't know. I think, and look, Lamar is great, but I don't know. I don't know if he's like consensus top 5 guy anymore. That'd be a tough sell.
Let me follow that up with 2 thoughts, and then I know I need to let you go, Jeremy, and I appreciate your time. Is that, though, just the way it's going to work, right? Like, Steve Bisciotti said at the owners' meetings last week, we don't necessarily have to play that game of fully guaranteed contracts. But is that true, or now that you don't put the toothpaste back in the tube? Like, now that Pandora's box has been opened, that's just the way it's going to be moving forward. And if you want to sign a quarterback, you're going to have to give him a fully guaranteed deal because that's what Deshaun Watson got.
I mean, it's possible. I think we're going to see how we're going to test the resolve of these teams to see how far they're willing to go to prevent having to pay that. But if you get into July and August and you just want it over with, whoever's going to be the least patient is going to break.
Mm-hmm.
So The Ravens might say, hey, it's not worth the headache. We know this guy's going to be here. Let's just set him up with the money, But I think the reason why Lamar's situation is so fascinating is because, and when I talk to people around the league, they bring this up, like, look, for as good as he is, I mean, the running style and the injury risk is huge, So it's like, can you commit all guaranteed money over 5 more years? I don't know. That's it. I just, for some, that's too rich. But for the Ravens and what they do, they're built around Lamar, and he's a great player. That might be worth the risk for them.
Well, and who are you if you don't do it? You don't have a quarterback, right? Like you're why we saw it. We saw what happened with Tyler Huntley. Everybody wanted to believe he could be Lamar Jackson. He ain't Lamar Jackson. Like it's a tough spot to be in where the risk is not having a quarterback in this league where you have no prayer. And then the last one for you. At some point, if you're the Ravens, if Lamar Jackson is hellbent on getting to free agency, do they have to think about trading him at some point, Jeremy? Do they have to have the conversation of let's see if there's a team, again, that's this desperate, the way that the Browns were, the way that maybe Carolina might be, or like Washington a year from now when their next quarterback experiment fails on them. Is there a point at which they have to consider, like, we can't just sit around and wait for the guy. We've got to see what's out there and maybe explore a trade?
I would be surprised.
Okay.
Just because here's the thing, too, that people forget with the franchise tag. So it's not going to be market value for him, right? Because if the market value is mid-40s or 40-something million a year, and the franchise tag is like low 30 millions or whatever it's going to be, like, it's not market value, but it's also a clean 1-year fully guaranteed deal. And we saw it with Dak, right? He played on $31 million, and then next year hit a huge deal. When you do these huge contracts, yeah, it looks great on paper. So unless it is fully guaranteed, and maybe the Deshaun Watson situation will change things, but typical deals, it's 3 years, and then the team can get up out of that deal at any time for really no penalty. So if that's the trade-off, if it is a traditional deal at a bigger number, then why not just play a tag or two? Like, you can make the argument for the player that the tag is your friend. Sometimes they work for Kirk Cousins, they work for Dak Prescott to a charm. So, there's still value in Lamar and the team wanting to do that and going year to year. I kind of like it because you're betting on yourself, and it's a fully guaranteed number.
But it's huge cap numbers for the team, obviously, right? And it's all a huge cap number in the 1 year that hurts you a little bit in trying to make it happen. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. At J Fowler, ESPN, of course, is how you follow him. Jeremy, is there anything we can plug for you where we're seeing you next? Anything like that?
Yeah, just check your local ESPN station. Yeah, we'll be there talking about all this stuff.
Right.
So,
Jeremy Fowler, always appreciate it, man. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes for us this morning.
No problem. Thanks, guys.